Life on Side B is a ministry of pastorship, a missiological ministry equipping church leaders and parents on LGBT plus inclusion and care. Learn more at pastorship.com. Also, we want to thank all of our patrons who keep the podcast going and growing through their continued giving. If you love this podcast, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/lifeonsideb. Now, on to the episode.
Hey everyone, it is Josh, and welcome back for another episode of Life on Side B. Today, I am joined by the one and only Paolo. Hello, Paolo.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Life on Side B.
Paolo Errico, we're so happy to have you.
Paolo Errico is so happy to be here.
I just realized I didn't say your last name in the first time, but
that's right.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking today about sexual integrity. Nothing, I feel like this entire season has just been one heavy thing after another.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you guys are really blazing the trail, and you're hitting the ground running this season.
We're trying to.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love getting into the messiness. I love getting into the mud. So you guys are doing great.
Well, I'm glad you like it. I'm glad there are people out there that are enjoying it. As we start, for anyone who hasn't heard of you, which why would they? No, I'm joking. Can you share with us how you identify and share with us a little bit about yourself, including there how you identify, and maybe a little bit of how you've gotten to where you're at in reconciling your faith and sexuality.
Yeah.
And do all of that in 30 seconds. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. I am gay. No. But I identify as gay, sometimes queer here and there. Rarely do I identify as same-sex attracted. It kind of depends on who I'm speaking to and how much grace is required. But most comfortably, I land in just using gay. Pronouns are he and him. I am 33 years old and in Southern California. But yeah, a little bit of my story. I actually grew up in a traditional Italian Catholic family. That's how I got the name Paolo Errico. And I
love when you explained to me. I already knew it, but that your name is just like Paul Rich.
Paul Richmond, yeah.
Paul Richmond.
Direct translation to English is Paul Richmond.
I already kind of got that from even the Spanish correlation to Italian, but I was like, I had not thought about how basic the name can sound when translated to English.
You know what's funny? So the name Paolo in Italy is so common and is so basic. And then Errico, it's nothing really special. But I'm so thankful I live in America.
Where people are like,
I'm instantly in a Lizzie McGuire film or any type of romantic Italian film. I am the romantic love interest, which makes it great and hard at the same time.
And I can see that for your life. Anyway, you can continue.
So yeah, both my parents were born and raised in Italy, and then they immigrated here to the U.S. And I was born in Southern California. They proved they're Italian by giving me an Italian name, and they proved they were Catholic by having 7 kids. So I'm the last of 7. Oh, yeah, I'm the last of 7 kids.
You have me beat
Lucky
by 2.
Yeah, you're one of 5?
5.
Yeah. 5. Yeah.
I cannot imagine 2 more being in there.
Oh, crazy. I'm glad they stopped. But yeah, one of 7 kids. I'm the very last. I'm the only queer one of the bunch. They save the best for last. Is what I like to tell my parents and my siblings. Yeah, thank you. But I have 5 brothers. I have 1 sister. We all grew up pretty tight knit community. But just like with there was a lot of chaos in my family with a bunch of people. Thanks to therapy, I'm working through all of that. And Growing up queer, it was just really hard. Although we identified as Catholic, we didn't really go to church or ever. So I never really went to mass or anything like that. I always joke, but it's pretty true. I knew more about the Pope than I did about Jesus or scripture or anything like that. And the only thing I knew about Christianity is what I heard in the news. And so seeing people picket outside of rallies or outside of pride parades was really the only experience and example that I had of Christians. And so I was pretty far from the church. Even though I was far from the church, I still carried a lot of shame in my sexuality. I think a part of that is just growing up in the 90s and having this machismo Italian upbringing. Being gay was really scary. So I kept it hidden most of my life. And then around my mid-20s, I had a long stint of just drug and alcohol abuse and a lot of partying. Kind of lifestyles of the rich and famous. Drug, sex, and rock and roll was kind of what I was desiring most. And decided to come out after trying a bunch of different things and realized I was really depressed, and the only way I can get out of it is if I came out. So I did in my mid-20s. And again, not a Christian, so I did what any person, I think, in their right mind would choose to do, and that was to date. And I dated a lot, and if I'm honest and vulnerable, I became really promiscuous. Tried to really fill that void and those lost years, quote unquote, that I had. Just tried to redeem all that by promiscuity and casual dating and hookup culture. So that was me in kind of my mid to late 20s. And then a friend of mine who was a coworker invited me to church. I knew he was a Christian. In the midst of my dating and my hooking up, I was really, really depressed. I fell into a deep well of depression and anxiety, and my friend was just constantly there for me. He was one of the guys that I came out to, and because I knew he was a Christian, I was a little bit scared of what he might say or do, but he was actually really sweet, and he was there for me, and met boyfriends that I had, and then a little bit after that fell into this depression, and he was there for me, and he really cared about me. He's straight, just to throw that in there, so there wasn't any hooking up or any like romance in there, but to kind of repay him for being such a cool friend to me, I went to the church that he went to, or that he was going to in Los Angeles, and just got to meet the most amazing people. The first preaching I had ever heard was about family in the kingdom of God, and it was the first time I really heard about the gospel and God as a father, and the acceptance and the love. And it was the first time that I heard about grace. And so when people say that they were wrecked, like I was wrecked. I cried so much that I had fevers for days because I wasn't sure what my body was processing and the emotions that were coming up. I was still drinking and using drugs at that point. And then, in the next few months, I kept on going to Sunday service and learned about identity in Christ, and learned about more about my heart and who God says I am and what he wants for me. And so I knew I wanted to, it was about 5 months into that first preach that I had heard, that I wanted to give my life to Christ. And then I started to work through sexuality. What does God say about being gay? Does God love gay people? I had all these questions, like, what does that mean for me? And my pastor, Brad, at Restored LA, really took me by the hand, and the community there, the leaders, really took me by the hand and walked me through a lot and allowed me to do my own digging and my own work. But essentially, sitting me down and being really honest and vulnerable and just really gentle and saying like, following Christ for you, like we want you to really consider celibacy and singleness, and we know that this isn't an easy thing. Like this is actually going to be really hard. We can't imagine. And they were really gentle. And again, they took me by the hand, and I hated them. I hated the church. I hated God, but I couldn't deny what Jesus was doing. Yeah. I couldn't deny what Jesus was doing in my heart. He was rearranging so many things in my life. And I just I was not okay with this one part, but really big part of my life, which was desiring a husband and desiring, sex and all that, and intimacy that is romantic and sexual. And so I was really honest throughout that whole part with the church. I was still dating, but I wanted to give God a shot. If he says who he says he is, and he says he's good, then I want to honor that, and gave God a year. And within that year, I feel like he really showed up to me. I was at a wedding, and just found myself near the altar where no one was there, and just bawling my eyes out of like, God, why are you doing this? Like, why would you do this to me? Why would you make me gay and then take me to this pit of felt like hell? Just the constant question, why are you doing this? And felt like I audibly heard him say like, you're looking for the ring on your finger, and I gave you my blood. And I thought I was crazy, but I couldn't deny that I was hearing that, and that it was not from me, because those are not the words that I wanted to hear. But it was at that point that I decided to vow to singleness and celibacy. So that's been about 5 years. I've been a believer for 6 now. So
amazing.
I wish I could say it got easy. It gets hard. I feel like as soon as I vowed to those things, and made that choice to live in this way, just every guy, every man known to the human race just popped up and showed a sudden interest, and I was just like, oh dang, what did I just sign up to?
I'm like, if there was ever proof that the devil is real
and he's a liar,
and he is a liar, it is in those moments. There's so much connection between our stories, because I relate to it on so many levels. Like the anger at the church and all of that at the beginning, having like an experience with God, and that going like, I know this is not me, because this is not the message I would create.
100%.
This is not the message I would create.
This is not
from God.
the God I wanted.
And seriously, with all of the opportunities with men that I got after like deciding to pursue celibacy, I'm like, the devil is real and the devil is a liar.
100%. Yeah. If we could talk about spiritual warfare in these moments, oh my gosh, I'm there.
Yes.
So many times.
There's so much that I mean, part of what your story, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing it and bringing that here with us. I think the first thing that I relate to is, actually, we're recording this in May. The episode with Leslie just dropped, and I was just editing it, and it reminds me of something that Leslie was talking about in the episode on grief, about we're all grieving different things, and sometimes that grief can come out in anger, especially for those of us who are grieving what we know, like the past history of what we know, which is different for side B people that are grieving what they don't know, like never having been in a relationship. And not one is worse than the other. That's not what I'm saying in any way. I'm just talking about the particular differences. And I think for a lot of us, that can come out in anger. The anger of that. And I just felt like I heard that so much.
The bitterness, the resentment, I think the list goes on, the contentment, like all of it. the shaking my fist towards God for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, so as you were making that move from being sexually active to pursuing celibacy, you've talked a little bit about kind of what that was like theologically, or, you know, coming to that understanding. What was that? I mean, first of all, I guess kind of the anger is part of it emotionally, but also what are some of the things that helped you in that shift, or what can you share a little bit more of what that process was like? Because I feel like a lot of times people think that you decide and then you like never deal with anything again.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. People think it's a lot smoother than what it actually is.
Well, I think the first thing that came up for me, so one of the things that I needed to work through was like, first of all, God is the King of salvation, not celibacy and singleness. That is something that I needed to seep into like my very core before I like embarked on the journey. But then going through the journey and how honest I was, probably like maybe a little overshare at points. I think the community that I have at Restored LA, which is was a smaller community at that time 6 years ago. It's since kind of gone a little bit bigger, but the group and the friends that really came alongside me and really stood with me in that confusion, and just like the pit of darkness and despair, like they really sat with me and just reminded me that like Jesus is sitting with me in those places. Like he makes homes in that. But ultimately, like just the space that the friends that I have at the church, the way that they really cared for me and loved me, allowed me to get to the place of reconciling faith and sexuality and sexual experiences.
That's so good.
Yeah.
There's so much. Yeah, it's like I feel as much as we talk about celibacy in the realm of singleness, I don't like it's not. I'm honestly more and more convinced it's not possible in isolation. You know, it's like,
oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I think like Josh, you and I spoke about this in person, but like when we talk about sexual integrity, it's not because we're writing the book on it. It's not because we've like solved it. We are work in progresses. We are being perfected by our faith, and like this ish is hard. We're on the road to learning what integrity looks like in all areas.
Yeah. And I think that kind of moves us into this whole thing of integrity, because as we've talked about, this has been a topic I've been wanting us to get to for a while, especially being able to talk about sexual integrity, you know, opposed to sexual purity, because I think even when we have this understanding, we still think of everything in these lines of sexual purity, this idea of just getting it done and never faltering ever in any of it. Because I think we can get uncomfortable when we have the idea of people are still growing in this, which then implies that they're not perfect in it. So I guess then my question, like, and we can just dialogue on this, is how would you define integrity? And I guess more specifically sexual integrity. How would you distinguish it from like sexual purity? There's a lot there, but what honestly, are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like you probably answer this the best, and it's more simple. But can you go, and then I'll see if I can build on that.
Yeah, that's
okay?
Perfectly fine, because this has been 100%. Because this is definitely, obviously, as I've been talking about, it's a big part for me. I just did my one of my presentations for my doctorate a few weeks ago, and one of the things I was talking about was integrity, because my presentation was on spiritual formation in queer lives. But anyway, I think that integrity is the process of bringing harmony. I think it's the best way I've been able to put it. It's the process of bringing our public and private life back into harmony, of being able to not have double lives, of being able to be one holistic person, of being integrated, of having all of your parts integrated. And I think it's so like not even just in a sexuality area, just regular integrity. This is something I was thinking about after my presentation is I see the closet as this process of compartmentalization. We separate, we hide, we hide certain things from others, from ourselves. So integrity is the process of reintegrating these parts that we have hidden, all of this. And so I think sexual integrity in this way is that part about bringing both our failures, our convictions, our desires, all of it into the light in one holistic way. But I think the scary part is that it starts with honesty and it's messy.
Yeah. I think beautifully said. I think, number one, it is a process and it is something to lean into and learn through, not to get over. I mean, even just our failures in whatever area of our lives, like they're not some things to just overcome and you get over. It's actually something to lean into and go through. So I think for LGBTQ folks, whether side B, side A, or wherever they're at in this journey, is we know how to compartmentalize, we know how to organize, we know how to hide and shapeshift and all this because of the wounds of the closet. We've done it so well that we know it well. And so I think also just whenever shame wants to mock vulnerability, it's really easy to run back to the closet because it's what I know best. The closet is what I know best because I've gone through it for such a long time. But I think the hard truth of walking out of the closet is allowing yourself to embrace the wounds and allowing yourself to embrace some of the deep ache of vulnerability and the fear of vulnerability, and walking out of that closet. So when it does come to sexual integrity specifically, I just think I think firstly, what's been a huge blessing to me is knowing that I have a community to share when I have failed. When I do fail, I live with Greg Piken, who you had a little bit ago, and love him. Everyone needs a Greg Piken. You can't have mine, but you can have your own. But he's also a marriage and family therapist, and he just has a huge heart for vulnerability. He's just wildly gifted at sitting with people and giving them space to process and asking really good questions. But he's also really gifted at loving me at my messiest and loving people at their messiest. And so I think for side B folks, when we do experience failure, it's knowing that we have people and who those people are to help us navigate through that. Did that answer your question?
That is so perfect. That's so beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, like that's the whole part of it. I love what you were saying about where we are geared towards this. Like I feel like we think that we come out and then we never have a temptation to go back into the closet. But I think when you've spent so many years, it might not be the same closet of, I'm going to take it back saying that I'm gay. But the closet is any time that we compartmentalize our life. And granted, I'm not saying to always go on Twitter and start listing everything you've done wrong. But it's about the people who you're doing life with. Like there's boundaries of some people just don't need to know things about your life. But it's about the people you're doing life with. Do they know you? Do they know the deep, dark parts of you? And it's that fear of not being loved. It's that fear of rejection. It's that fear from God, from others, that keeps us from pursuing that. And I think that shifts away from the idea of sexual purity, because I think that sexual purity just gets into this self-improvement idea. Like, let me take steps to do actions better, rather than knowing myself, knowing my faults, knowing the good, the bad, the ugly, and allowing other people to see that in order to better pursue. Because there's a quote that I keep going back to by Rich Villodas, who wrote The Deeply Formed Life. And he said, we hold on to secrets. Our body, when we hold on to secrets, our bodies often manifest the poison we store up in our psyches. And so it literally does something to our bodies, I think, in many ways.
Well, there's also that phrase in psychology, you are as sick as your secrets. And secrets literally do fester, and they almost grow legs and crawl around. And I'm so by trade, I'm a massage therapist, and I've been a massage therapist for the past 10 years, almost 10 years, which also makes being side B a little tough.
I'm sure, talking about sexual integrity.
I mean, just being Christian in general.
Seriously.
But yeah, we could talk about that more too. Oh shoot, I forgot what I was going to say.
You were talking about the whole thing of secrets in psychology.
Secrets, yeah. I think being a massage therapist and knowing the body really well, and understanding my own body really, really well too. I feel like knowing when I'm living my life in a disintegrous way, it causes such a divide in my own body, even in like my own spirit and body, to where I'm not living in a completely holistic, whole self, embodied way that I was meant to live in. And there's a tragedy in that, because I was never meant to walk in that. God didn't call me to hide myself. But I think I'm fortunate enough being a massage therapist that I notice it in my body, and I notice it in my emotions. And sharing it when it comes up has been really important.
Yeah. I think that's been another thing that recently I have been exploring about in sexual integrity, that I don't have a firm, I'm like verbalizing my
externally processing.
So I'm externally processing currently. So this is not organized, but I think there's another part of sexual integrity. When we think about sexual integrity as Christians, we automatically go to both, how do I like open about my failures, as well as like, how do I pursue being in line with my convictions, living honestly within my convictions, that kind of thing. But I think you're pointing to another point of integrity that I think is important, of if sexual integrity is about our bodies, we also have to reintegrate our understanding of our bodies as ourselves. Like, I like the language of, I don't have a body, I am a body. Like, it is part of my personhood. I'm a big Hebrew Bible person, and anyone who studied Hebrew Bible knows for the Old Testament, I mean, I would argue the whole Bible, but we're not going to get into that argument. For now, I'll just say the Hebrew Bible is very big on the embodied life, that humans can't exist without bodies, because it's part of who we are. And I think that with that, I think it's kind of hard, because I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel in an unhealthy way, because of my life before becoming a Christian, I've had an understanding of my body in a way because of my sexual history, my activity, like the ways has allowed me to explore my body and understand my body, granted through ways that I probably don't agree with, but it was a good aspect that came out of it, because I know my body in many ways. And I've been exploring more like, what are better ways for someone, which I think there are. I've learned a lot through breathing techniques. I've learned a lot through just the understanding of touch and all of these different kinds of things. So I don't think it has to come through a sexual history. I just think we're geared towards that. But I love that whole thing of like that embodied life, because I think unless we understand I am a body, we're not living integrity either, because we're thinking of ourselves in compartmentalized again.
Well, I think anytime That I totally agree with you with like learning from past sexual experiences. I think one of the things that I became really sensitive to is knowing when my body and my personhood is being taken advantage of. You know, part of my experiences, my sexual experiences was just allowing myself to be taken advantage of, and allowing myself to, going into talking about integrity, I went into a lot of situations that weren't healthy. There were a lot of underground, not even underground, just people who were, you hear it on the DL, just men who were in relationships with women and identified as straight. And I just put myself in a lot of really harmful situations. And I think even in just like physically abusive situations, and the wounds on my body healed, but the wounds in my soul and in my heart has taken a longer time to do that. And so being honest, and even earlier this year of 2022, I shared with our close group of Side B friends just a few of the experiences that really, really affected me. And one of the things that has happened is opening myself up to intimacy in other ways, like emotional and intellectual and spiritual intimacy. Because although sex is great, it's not the most needed connector that we have and that we are given. And so sex is just an easy way to experience intimacy, but it's not the only way. And that having sexual experiences is really hard saying that, but I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think it's like, there's even other ways of getting physical intimacy that don't involve sex. But when we've trained our bodies in some ways to receive it in that way. I just finished reading Eve Tushnet's book Tenderness, which y'all need to read it. It's so good. So good. I cried in the introduction. Like, not even chapter 1. I cried in the introduction.
No.
But there was a whole thing she wrote in it. She has a part where she talks about chastity and sexual integrity and stuff. And I love where she talks about this practice of understanding that our sex is a way that we speak many messages through. Like, we speak our needs through, we speak our fears through, we speak our anger through, we speak our love and our desire through. And so many times, like in some situations within marriage, like that can be a good way of expressing some things. But many times, while there's a practice of being able to say, hey, in this, what am I trying to communicate, or what am I trying to say in this moment through these desires? And I think that can be both. I mean, it's hard because, but having to do this process of going, hey, what am I trying to communicate, either about what I need or what I want to say to this other person, or like communicate in this way about myself or about others. That, and how do I find another way to do that? But I think that's been really good, even just the very fact of going, hey, what am I trying, what is my internal self trying to communicate in this moment? And it might even just be, I love a person. It might be, I want to feel ownership over myself. Because as you said, like, I really think that's a big thing for those of us who have been taken advantage of. Sometimes sex can also be a way of re-empowering ourselves as well.
Oh yeah, completely. And I think, again, not to say that purity and integrity means perfection. That is not it. But I think knowing what's driving me to not even desire, but to act in a sexual way, I think I've needed to really do just soul searching. Just as you were saying, like, what am I actually desiring? I think for me, about a month ago, Greg and I moved to San Diego, which is about 2 hours south of Los Angeles, where we were living. And we lived for the Side B community. We moved down here for the Side B community that we have and have been establishing and have been growing closer to. But that has meant that I moved away from 33 years of what I've always known and the community that I've always known. In the midst of that, a huge blow up in my family, my like bio family, and the family dynamics that I had were shifted and have led to a lot of confusion. And in that, I think I took, I think I gave myself a little bit of a license to not live in an integrous way, and getting back to that point of where I'm walking in a holistic way, I think, though, is really scary and opens me up to a lot more vulnerability from spiritual attack. I think it's also softened me a lot more for leaders, for our other Side B community that is still trying to figure this out. And I think learning to hold space for others has come from learning to hold space and grace for myself. Which,
that's good.
That ain't easy.
Yeah. Well, and that moves into another question that we had here, which, first of all, thank you for the vulnerability of sharing that. Yeah. And what has it looked like for you to kind of move back into integrity through that process? Anything that you'd be willing to share, kind of thing, like, but because I think that's a big part of this is, I think integrity is admitting we're going to make mistakes, and experiencing the love of God through that. But what does that look like for you?
I think the thing that has been the most soul crushing for me has been being honest with mistakes. As an Enneagram 1, if we can just park an Enneagram talk for a little bit, my Enneagram 1-ness does not like admitting mistakes. And although I enjoy thinking that I'm more of an improver, like the Enneagram 1, the improver rather than the perfectionist, I also am aware that I like to do things perfectly. And I want my purity and my integrity to be perfect. So admitting that I've failed in that is, I think, is what my heart and soul needs, but it also gives me the ability to say, I've tried to take control over my life. I've tried to take control over my body and my growth, and it's just not working. And so I think just the steps to getting back to it, again, community. I have a phenomenal spiritual director that I tell everything to. I have Greg and other Side B folks that are close by that I tell everything to. My pastor has been amazing, even throughout the transition of San Diego, has been just really amazing. And so I feel very cared for by them. And just being seen and known has been the most healing. That totally reminds me another thing that Eve Tushnet said in her book, which I thought was really good. I don't know if this is the exact quoting of it, but it's the note I wrote down. When chastity becomes simply about moral improvement without experiencing God in the midst of failures, it produces soil ripe for dishonesty. And it's like that whole thing of like, if we can't learn how to experience God in the midst of failure, we're not going to be able to do it. Like, it's not. Yeah.
No, that's so, I think the vulnerability part is so big. Like, even from my own experience, one experience I had wanted to share was a few years ago, while I was still while I was already in ministry. My family went through a tragedy, and it put me into traumatic survival mode. That I just hid from others, and I think a lot of it is talking about the Enneagram. I'm a 3 wing 2, so I just want to help people. I through this tragedy that my family went through, I realized I couldn't help them. Like, I couldn't make it go away.
Yeah.
And I think that moved me to connect with a guy that I felt like I could fix his problems. And it was a married man, and we ended up having an affair. And I still remember after we slept together going, what just happened? Before that, when it was more emotional, I made lies and all of this stuff. But the moment it became physical, I was like, how did I end up here? Yeah. This is more than just having sex with a guy. Like, this is a married person.
Yeah.
And ultimately, long story short, cut off the relationship with the guy and moved into place of tried to even be friends for a while, but just was like, nope, need to cut this off. But being honest with the people in my life was really hard. It was really, really hard, because it was something I had lied to, not just hid from them. I had intentionally lied about it. And thankfully I had an amazing workspace that I was in at the time that I was in ministry and did not lose my job, which is very rare, but they were willing to take me through a process of restoration. And I think for me, what I learned through that process was we sometimes get restoration and discipline mixed up.
Speak on it.
Yeah.
Speak on it.
I obviously sometimes restoration can include discipline, and I think it needs to. And I experienced that. But ultimately it's about this thing of how did I get here? What led me here? And how do I address that? And I think it does require honesty. It begins with honesty, but restoration can't happen without a complete vulnerability and humility. And I think that that's what makes it so difficult on the part of the person, because it can't happen unless the person wants it. I had to want it. And I know what was even harder is after I had already started this process of restoration and everything, I ended up a while later having a situation where the wife found out about it, everything that happened. And I had told the guy to let her know, but she ended up finding out. And I think that was always the most grueling part for me. Because the thing is that I have always held to a thing of I think we need to work on creating a culture where Christians and ministry leaders, especially ministry leaders, can get healthily, emotionally and sexually. And I think that means allowing a space where they can be honest. I have told all of the co-hosts on this podcast, they will never be kicked off for having sex with someone. It's not going to happen. I just want them to be honest about what they're going through. If we can, if we can have a culture here where you're going through stuff and you can share it and process it, maybe before it gets to something like that, then maybe we can help and care for it. But when there is this culture where people have to be perfect, then I can't share the things that are going, because people are going to start getting worried that I might screw up. And I think that that's kind of been what it has taught me in it. It doesn't mean, and again, I think even it can also get mixed up, restoration can also get mixed up with I don't even know the word for it, but unnecessary grace for a person who's not actually wanting restoration. They just want to continue moving forward.
License?
Yeah, like a license. Exactly. Restoration does not mean license. Thank you. Because it means I remember one of the things that led to that affair was a drinking problem I had. And so with work ended up going, you need to address this. You have to go and deal with this. So yeah, there's just so much there, but I feel like it's one of those areas I don't see churches doing well.
Yeah.
Like no one, we aren't doing it well at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that, especially in our queer spaces, is for queer people who are in ministry, being queer and Christian is already not addressed fully in a lot of our Christian spaces. And so when there is a situation where someone who is queer, whether does sleep with someone or makes out with someone or whatever it is, and they're reprimanded in a way that honestly I think might be done out of fear and might be done out of also just ignorance. I think just continues to spread the idea that for us queer people, like being honest and being open can get us fired and lose our life, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something that all LGBTQ people I think are born with. And then when it happens in ministry, the last place it should happen, I think the last place that should happen, it just continues to affirm shame. It continues to affirm the closet. It's safer than being outdoors. And that's so contrary to the gospel. So contrary.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so sad. Like we've seen this happen so many times.
Friends. Yeah.
That like, they're just being honest.
Yeah.
They're just being honest. And the reaction is fired, disciplined.
Yeah.
Nothing of, hey, what led you here? Like, what were you seeking? How can we how can we help you? How can we support you? Sure, that might include, hey, why don't you not lead for a while you take care of yourself? But not out of discipline, but like, it seems like you have some stuff you need to work on.
Totally.
So like, let's do that.
Yeah.
So I get that. It's not a matter of, but it also might not include that. It's a contextualized thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And being able to create that space where, like, for me, I've had to learn, wow, I have to be careful about this need to fix people's problems because it gets me into trouble and it gets me like into this. And so I've had to learn I can't fix everyone's problems. And that's been one of the biggest things that I've had to work on that kind of gets into this about my boundaries with people and all of those things. But it's because I have the safe people around me who I knew, like, they were going to be mad when I told them that I had hid this from them.
Yeah.
They were going to be hurt that I didn't trust them, but I knew they wouldn't leave.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of grace, is like, it hurts more that you think being hidden is better than actually being honest. Yeah. And again, like, hiddenness, isolation are lies that the enemy would want us to believe.
Yeah.
I'm first of all, Josh, just to like go back a little bit, thank you so much for sharing that experience. I can only imagine how hard that is to be in the space that you're in. And just your willingness to share that is really, really brave and courageous. And I'm thankful that we have someone like you leading the podcast that you do.
Thank you for that. I don't always feel that way.
I imagine.
I'm like, why am I leading this thing?
Imagine.
Yeah, no. I've been nervous to share it because I've been planning this for a while to share it. But I have felt for a while that obviously, as I said, not everyone needs to know everything. And like, there's even in that, there's boundaries. Like, I've wanted to just tell my story. I'm not telling the other guy's story. I'm telling my story. Yeah. But I felt like leading this, there was a responsibility of, if we want to create a culture where that kind of restoration can be available for some people, then it needs to start with some of us being honest of the fact that we've been there.
Yeah.
And like, I've had to accept that, like, the ways that it has brought consequences on my life, because it always does. It always will bring consequences. Some maybe less warranted than others, but like it just happens, and accepting that, but then trying to allow for God's love to be experienced in that.
Yeah.
And I say that acknowledging that I know that like you and me have amazing communities around us that have loved us, and many people are not in that way. Many people know for a fact that if they share at work, they're going to get fired, or if they share with their family or their close friends about something that happened, they're going to get humiliated.
Yeah.
And no one should be in that situation, especially among Christians. I wish I could just say, find new friends or find a new job, but it's not always that easy.
Yeah.
And so I just want anyone who's in that situation, who's listening, I just want to say my heart goes out to you.
Yeah.
And you don't deserve to be in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh, man, would you be open to sharing like what was the hardest part of owning some of those consequences?
Yeah. I will say the hardest part for me, the number one hardest part, is and will always be what I did to the wife, in the sense, like what it all meant for her. That will always be the part that haunts me most, because she didn't deserve it. And so that's always just been something I've had to accept. Without conversation, without anything like that. I think that has been the number one thing in it, because I never wanted to hurt her, but yet it's there. We hurt people by our actions. They just do. I think that accepting what people's thoughts are of me because of this, when people learn about it, whether from me or from someone else, I can't control it. What that blocks for me, what that changes for me, it's been a thing of accepting, like, God, you have me in the place I'm at. You have the community around me. I'm not here to tell this full story to everyone so that, that they believe me of something, or I don't know. But it's been a thing of like, God, I own it. And I also experience your grace in the midst of it. And I think that that's been the most thankful thing that has come through it, is it has been the biggest driver of my humility going forward, of caring for other people. I don't know. That's been some of it for me.
I think that's, even if it's some of it, it's a really heavy sum to carry, and a weight to carry. And again, Josh, like, I can't imagine a better person to be leading something like this. And like, like truly, I think your ministry comes from a woundedness. And I think our fave is our Henry Nouwen, how he speaks about the wounded healing.
Yes.
And so
yes,
I think thank you for modeling that.
Thank you as well. And like something I'd love your thoughts on with this, because kind of going back to that quote from Eve about the importance of experiencing God in the midst of failure, like, how do you think we can have more grace for ourselves and for others as we pursue integrity more in our lives? That can be after failure, that can be in the midst of all of it. Like, how do we have grace?
Gosh, if I'm honest, I think that's that is the thing that probably keeps me up at night the most, is in the midst of really big failures, and even just again, like the past sexual experiences that I have had. And I think relating that to the past experiences, I've had to put Jesus like almost visually, physically in those spaces, like in the room. And those are some of the craziest and scariest questions. Like, Jesus, where were you in all of that? Like, Jesus, like, where was your face? Like, where were you standing in that room when all of that happened? You know, and like, why didn't you do anything? And I think I have allowed myself, even in most recent experiences, of just saying like, Jesus, where could you have intervened more? And, you know, and so I think the grace is one in knowing that like he was there all along. I think one of the beauties that I've been able to experience is like allowing God's presence to be literally everywhere, and knowing that he is literally everywhere. And when we hear you are my son whom I love and I am well pleased in, like that is a space that God as Father like can never walk out of. Like that is a feeling, that is emotion, and that is the truth that he can never walk away from. It's unlike him, it's unnatural. And so the grace, I think, for me is, though repentance and vulnerability and being honest with my failures is scary and it hurts because it exposes me to a lot of my failures, knowing that he can't leave from that space is like where my heart becomes mended. And I think there's grace in the mending. I don't know if it's grace in the mending. Yeah, I don't know that it's something that I just, wake up and find grace, but I think grace is in the mending process.
Yeah. I love what you said about just acknowledging God being everywhere, kind of thing. And it made me think back to Psalm 139 of like fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
I was doing a study on it, and I thought it was interesting because I think we sometimes take that psalm, that statement, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and just make it like a independent doctrine.
Yeah.
Of when I think that that's not what it is, because I was reading the psalm, and the beginning of it goes of acknowledging that God sees you, like God sees me, all of my desires. There's this understanding that God sees the good, the bad. He knows what you're thinking. He knows everything that you do, and this acknowledgement of God just holistically seeing you. And then there comes this understanding, which is kind of what I felt like related to you, because there's a verse in it where he says, where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I go from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, in the grave, you are there. And it just made me think about this thing of like God's presence is everywhere.
Yeah.
He's everywhere.
Yeah. And there's nowhere where he will not go for you. There is nowhere he will not go for you.
Exactly. It's that moment when even the gay clubs where we've had random sex become temples.
Yeah.
In that way, of that sacred space. It's just this thing of when we can acknowledge that God's presence is even in these places where we felt we were not around him.
Yeah.
I think transforms that. Then when we see that we are completely known, and when we see that God is everywhere, we can say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah. Because
even though I am not what I would like to be, I am not, there are parts of me, and I don't even want to say parts, because again, the integrity, but that I am growing. Yeah. I am growing more into the image of God.
Yeah.
I am fearfully and wonderfully made because God sees me
Yeah.
and is with me,
Yeah.
even in this moment,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm.
And I think that's even helped me. I think that has helped me as I, for a long time after becoming side B, I couldn't go back to clubs, like gay clubs and stuff.
Yeah, I get
It was just,
that.
it was so much associated. Like, I'll go to gay clubs in South Florida and I'm like, I've had sex in all of these bathrooms. I mean, let's just be honest. Wow, I don't know if I should say that on a podcast right now, but we'll see if that
We'll see if that makes the cut.
But I remember that passage was one of the biggest things that I remember one of my first times going back to a club after becoming side B, and this is years and years later, and just having this feeling of recognizing God's presence with me in this moment changed it drastically for me.
Yeah.
It changed it from what it was.
Yeah.
Because I had always seen it as a place where God was not present.
Totally. Yeah. And I what's crazy is as we work through integrity, and the Spirit of God dwells in us deeply and is actively bringing all those broken pieces into one, so that we can live holistically. It grieves our spirit to not bring him into all those places. And I think similarly, though I didn't have quite those experiences that you had, being a massage therapist and knowing that I've overstepped boundaries and that I've made mistakes with clients and that I've did things that I really wish I didn't do and accepted money for things that I wish I didn't do. I think it's to think about those experiences and not bring the Spirit of God into that grieves me deeper than knowing that he's with me in those spaces. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. To
100%.
shut the door out, to shut him out just hurts so much more than bringing him into that.
Yeah.
And that feels counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It feels counterintuitive, but it's the process of restoration and integrity.
Mm-hmm. And I think through that process, we then begin to find of knowing ourselves more, living an embodied life, understanding our desires, like all of these things, and living honestly in the midst of that. I think it does move us into better chastity. Like it is that process. Like when me making a mistake is not the detriment that now God is against me.
Yeah.
Like I don't live with this fear anymore. You don't live with that fear the same way. And I know for some people there can get in the whole thing of license and all this different kind of stuff,
Totally.
license sin. But like, I think in general, it moves into such a healthier place. When I know, like, I can't promise people I'm not going to make a mistake in the future.
Yeah,
I can't make that promise.
Same.
I can't do it. I feel like I've gotten into a really good place now from where I was. And I know there are some mistakes that I've made that I ain't never making again. But I can't promise I'm never going to screw up in stuff. Yeah. But I know that like if I move out of integrity, then I can move back into it. Yeah. And I can take those steps. Yeah. So
beautiful put. Beautiful.
Paolo, I love talking with you.
Oh my gosh, Josh. This I adore you so much, friend. And I've been really blessed not only to be a fan of this podcast, but to be a friend of yours has just, I'd call you a treasure, but that's too simplistic of a word to describe you.
Thank you. And just as you said, everyone needs a Greg Pikin in their life. I also believe everyone needs a Paolo Errico.
Oh, thank you.
Everyone needs one of each of you.
Yeah. You included.
Well, to finish out, we have one more question we're asking all guests. Okay. If you could give a message to your younger self, you pick the age, what would you say?
I see the 15-year-old self right now, in the midst of his confusion and braces and pimples and all of that. I think if I could lean in really closely and say, you were never the mistake. You were never the mistake.
That's good.
And you are going to be so, so loved.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Because we all love you so much.
Thanks, Josh. Love you too.
Yeah. Y'all listening, I hope you have enjoyed this and got something out of it. I hope you don't hate us.
Yeah. Please don't.
But
don't.
But if you do,
me.
right? Don't come for Paolo. You are welcome to come for me. I can take it. Write to us if you have questions or thoughts after this. You can go to lifeonsideb.com and send us an email. Send us a message on Instagram, Twitter, tweet us. We would love to hear from you and what you thought of this conversation. I think we need more of these conversations.
Yeah.
We talked about sexual violence last season and just felt like this was the next step in that conversation about with which we needed to talk, and so many more to come. So thank you all for listening. We love you all. Thank you, Paolo, for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you. Seriously.
Yes. And we will talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.